was glad when they said, come let us go to the house of the Lord. I was glad when they say, come let us go to the church with no walls. You are my brother, you are my sister. From all over the world we are united in the house of God, in the church with no walls.
Welcome to the Church with No Walls podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dearbone, and today I have the extreme pleasure of being in the presence of a multi, I believe is what they call people like Chester, a multi, because he's multi-talented. He is a spoken word poet, a blogger, an author, a speaker, among other things. So I have the extreme pleasure of being joined by Chester Delagneau. So Chester, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you on here.
Thank you, Ryan. That was very kind of you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to today. I've been excited.
So Chester, first of all, obviously, we talk about church and religion, and there's a lot of different ministries that people have. So some of them have ministries inside the church. Some of their ministries expand outside of the church. How did you first get into spoken word or being an author?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
This isn't going to work. He's going to start barking. I'm so sorry.
Yo, you're fine. You're fine.
Come on, man. Nope. Come on, baby. There you go.
I got a dog too, so I understand.
Sorry about that. I thought it was going to work, but I guess he heard us. He heard us talking, and then that kind of got him going. So
no worries. I got a little dog too, so I understand. So I'll just pick up on the beginning of that question, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Yep.
So for you, Chester, obviously there's a lot of different types of ministries, some that are inside the walls of the church, some that extend outside of it. And so with you, you have a ministry or several ministries that extend outside of the church. Kind of walk us through the journey of how you got into spoken word, into being an author, blogger, speaker, how you kind of got that path to your ministries.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Wow. So, what's interesting is it really came on the heels of kind of having a how would you put it? I was in a PhD program, and all things just came to a halt. And when that happened, my body shut down. I was going for years and years with no break, and so my body just completely shut down. My thyroid took a big hit. I couldn't sleep anymore. I was just taxed mentally and then physically. So I tried to take some time off, and I ended up having to bow out of the PhD program I was in systematic theology at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. And that was rough. So I had to heal, and during that healing time is when I got reacquainted with my love for all things creative, being creative. So my podcast, my blog on all things flourishing is when I started to invest into that and started writing poetry and prose. And what I mean by prose or articles, longer length writings to aphorisms, shorter, more inspirational types of writing, and then even short stories, and then more recently to a novel. So I would say that the catalyst to my creativity, it was something that was pretty traumatic at the time, and that was having to say goodbye to this dream I had of attaining a doctorate and being able to teach theology. And so let's see, I published my first book, this book on what I call imaginative apologetics. So under this umbrella of imaginative apologetics, not to be confused with its, let's say, classical apologetics, which has to do with using reason to prove things like the existence of God. Imaginative apologetics, as the title indicates, um, necessitates the imagination, using imagination. Just think of Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis, that kind of stuff. You can also think of I think of Jesus as a imaginative apologist when he is you know helping his disciples, or sometimes maybe even getting them to dig deeper with his parables, and to try to and to hear, those who have an ear will hear, for them to you know to invest. So I wrote a book, a children's book. My son was he 10 at the time, and I titled it Imagining Jesus. And so it was the story about Jesus showing up in his life, knocking at the door, literally, at night bedtime. And he answers the call, opens the door, and Jesus is on the other side of the door, and there's a jungle behind him, and he's inviting the boy, 10-year-old, who I named after my son Nathaniel, to go on this journey with Jesus in the jungle. So, yeah, yeah. So he goes on this journey and has all these adventures, and there's the sneaky snake that's trying to get him, and then there's this lion, this massive, majestic lion that's also stalking him. And so that was my first, I think, yeah, that was my first children's book, called Imagining Jesus, Practicing the Presence of God for Children. And then after that, I wrote another book, called From the Ashes We Rise. And that's a collection of my poetry, prose, and short stories. Um, and there was some spoken word poems that I wrote in that book. Here's a copy of it, just so that you can see what it looks like.
Nice. I like that. Great
Yeah.
cover. I like that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it took me a while to do the cover. I did it, use this cool software program. Um, so that's what got me into doing spoken word. Is when I started writing poetry, I thought, you know what? This is, it's great, but I want to accent the words and the meaning in a more dramatic way. And I thought, well, that's spoken word. So I started to dabble into actually performing that, and then memorizing some of them, and having to and then getting the chance to perform. I did an apologetics conference at the church that we were attending before we moved to Temecula. We've been in Temecula for a couple years now. Before that, we were at in Dana Point and attending a church there called Capitol Beach Church. And the pastor there was great. He really appreciated my passion for arts and apologetics. So I said, "Hey, let's do a conference where we combine those two. We'll have artists there, and we'll have apologists there, and so it will engage the heart and the mind. And it was a cool conference to have. We had some really big names there. We had Sean McDowell, we had Brett Kunkle, this guy Chester Delagneau was amazing. So yeah, so that, and I performed a couple of spoken words there as well, and then I did a presentation. So it really has been in the last few years that I started getting really into using my creativity in different facets, from writing um, a children's story to then writing this, book on poetry and short stories, and then finishing up. And I'm sorry. And then right now I'm almost finished with two other books. So the sequel to From the Ashes We Rise is a book where I've collected the poems, short stories, and prose that I've written since the first book. And
Mhm.
so I'm publishing a second book, and I'm gonna title this one Imaginative Apologetics: Braiding Together Truth, Goodness, and Beauty. And then I am waiting to get endorsements. I'm reaching out to people for my first full-blown novel that I just finished, called Salvador, Sophia's Story. So You asked me the question, outside of the church, this ministry, and it it actually it includes a clothing line, if you can believe that. Well, not a
Wow.
clothing line, but I thought, you know what? I had the cover of Salvador commissioned by this very talented artist, Kip Ayer. And I fell in love with the picture right away for the cover of Salvador. And I thought, this is bigger than a book. This belongs on a shirt, belongs on a poster, belongs. So you can kind of see it back there. You see that picture. It's very hard to
Okay.
see,
Yeah, I see. I see it.
but,
Yeah.
but I have it right here on the shirt. So.
Very nice.
Yeah, so you see that's Salvador in the back holding his brother Mateo, who's a gangbanger. And you see there, you see the good, you see the hood. You, there's a few designs down at the bottom, but anyway, it's called Salvador. And so I'm pretty creative, and I try to just explore that creativity as it comes and trying to see what sticks and how I can best glorify God, how I can best serve the church, and try to put a couple dollars in my pocket.
Well, obviously you are a busy man. So when you're looking at doing all these different things, how do you hope that the message hits people? Because obviously, when you do spoken word, it's going to hit differently than maybe reading a scripture or being in an actual church, or when somebody's reading Salvador or anything else. How do you feel like being in these spaces and places affects people differently than being in the more traditional spaces of what people consider to be a church or
Mm.
where they would go for worship?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I think of the experience that most Christians have when they go to church and they engage in what we would call the normal church experiences of, you know, doing church on Sunday, maybe having midweek Bible study, going to maybe a conference, marriage conference or things like that. These are all great, wonderful things that the church needs. Or prayer night, a vigil, a worship night, things like that. All wonderful things, and they do incorporate a creative side to it. Worship, you talk about creativity. So there is a lot of creativity that is being utilized, talents and gifts that God's given, his people to use to bring people together, to have community, to worship God in a community. The thing that I think that um, imaginative apologetics does is that it says, yes, creativity is good, but it doesn't have to be explicitly, it doesn't have to say Jesus, in every line. It doesn't have to um, be put in this box. It can go outside of that box, and it can include many other, think of pretty much every artistic endeavor that somebody could practice from, someone is, using ceramic, or someone is dancing. It could be music, but it doesn't have to be worship. It can be a rap. It can be, country. It could be whatever genre of music you want, but something that is going to inspire people, and it's going to bring down the defenses of people who, let's say, if you were talking to someone. So this is where I think it might really be helpful to see the difference. Let's say a Christian approaches a group of Gen Xers, right?
Mhm.
Or no, Gen Zers. Yeah, this generation, right? Gen Zers.
Gen Z, yeah, Gen Z, yeah.
Yeah, Gen Zers, right? And starts to, let's say, preach the gospel, which I totally think is great, right? Chances are they may, the group of kids may end up just, scoffing at them, or, just like thinking it's so irrelevant to them. Versus, let's say, if somebody were to approach them, say, hey, do you mind if I do a rap for you? You
Mhm.
mind if I do a spoken word, and gets into it and feels it? Something happens when you tell a story, right? Because now you're not talking directly to them. You are in a sense performing. You're the story, and there are elements of that story that will apply to them. But what it will do is it'll bring down the defenses, because now they're involved in this. They are these participants in the story hearing, and they want, because we're made for that. We're made for story, right? Designed to crave a beginning, a middle, and an end, to see resolution. And so I think that's what happens when we engage in, things that I'm involved in with spoken word and story, because I guess it's what's called narrative theology, right?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
our own story. Your story is so powerful, within, your context and how people see you. You're this walking testimony. So it's fun when you get to actually put some um, art, into it that people can appreciate and be like, "Whoa, that was I was not expecting that." I think it's also a little bit of the unexpected that people that will bring the defenses down a little bit too.
And so with that, how do you keep from either going too secular or people perceiving it as being, oh well, he's kind of moving more in the secular realm. He's not he's not being true to God because he's doing things that are more considered to be secular. How do you navigate those waters?
Ooh, that's a great question, Ryan. It, you know, I'm interested in, doing what the Lord has called me to do. Now, with that said, I don't want to be, I think there's a lot of wisdom in doing things in a way where you don't want to cause people to stumble, whether it's in the church or outside the church, right? Outside the people are thinking this guy is behaving just like I am. Why should I change? Or the church sees me as someone who's, like you said, secular. Now, I think there's a way to be authentic and to be true to what God's called, like someone like me, to do. And if I have an opportunity, it's always good to be able to define your terms. So if I have the opportunity, I would be able to explain to someone that there's the distinction is not between the sacred and the secular. I think that's a misunderstanding. It's the difference is between the sacred and the profane. So the sacred and the secular makes it sound like there are things. It makes it sound like God is not involved in the things of, let's say, politics, or in public schools, or things like that. Like God has no, like he's almost like, oh, I can't go in there.
Right.
Even though they have taken out, a prayer in public schools. So, that, yes, okay, I get that. But what happens is, the better way to see the distinction between what God is about what God is when God is glorified and not glorified. So it's not about, oh, is God, it's like what Eric Liddell said when he was in the story Chariots of Fire, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
missionary. Oh, that story, that part of that movie is just, it gives me the chills when he's talking to his sister and he's explaining to her, that God has made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure. Now, people would say, his sister would say, no, but that's secular.
Right.
Where's Jesus in running? What's that about? And he's like, no, but he created me. He designed me. When I run, I'm full, and to not run, he says, would be to hold him in contempt. So
Mhm.
I think the distinction is between the sacred and profane. And what I mean by that is Sacred is where God is glorified. Profane is where God is not being glorified. So that is the distinction that I live my life by is like, okay, there is the realm over here, where it's a rap, a rap group or rap song or whatever, and it's clearly um, it's misogynist, it's racist, it's whatever it is, and it's
Mhm.
like, okay, that I wouldn't say that's secular, I would say that's profane. God is not being glorified by that song, right? Um, and so yes, there are things we need to, steer clear of, be wise. That's not going to draw me closer to the Lord. Um, so that's kind of the way I would look at it when somebody would say, oh, what you're doing is secular. I would say, well, is it? So what, how do you define secular? Because what I'm doing is I'm reaching an audience that um that has appreciates that we are created in God's image, and we have a creative imagination. We have an imagination where we can use song, we can use murals and things like that, show the color of that God has created. He could have created us in black and white, but no, it's color. He gives us color. He gives us different tones so we can hear, and depict different sounds, and so we can create music. And so that's where I would tell someone that appreciate God's creation and that He made it for His glory, and where people aren't glorifying him, that's the profane. But why not use art to bridge those two realms together?
That, that's a really good answer. And within that, I think that's why maybe we see such a proliferation of people out there doing more, more people putting out Christian gospel music, putting out books, putting out, having hosting podcasts and stuff like that, because it's about, the ultimate glorification of God. So with
Mhm.
that being said, how do you make your stuff stand out from everybody else that's out there? Or is that even the concern about making sure people see your stuff versus, the other person who's writing novels or doing spoken word? Or is it just the hope that somebody takes something from mine, no matter what happens, whether it's a bestseller or only five people ever read it or see it? What's the thought process that goes in that?
Well, Ryan, I think that for me, what the Lord has pressed upon my heart and what I want is for people to connect. I want connection. I want to be able to connect with people, and I want them to connect with each other, and I want them to connect with God. I want there to be this connection so that people feel like they're heard, and that they can identify with another human being. And so I think in that way there is this understanding, there is empathy is a part of that. Um, I mean, for me, that connection is huge. So I think of being authentic and true to the experience of human nature. So think of Dostoevsky. When I think of, let's say, my favorite book of his is The Brothers Karamazov. And so when he writes human nature and he writes his characters, I mean, there is a depth that he goes that I I rarely see writers today going to that depth that is true. I mean, I'm not talking about just getting dark and because yeah, you can create someone that's very dark, their character is dark and really demented and depressed and okay, fine, but what I'm talking about is the struggle. It's not just the depth. It's this struggle, existential struggle between, let's say, hope and despair, right? Which is what I think, does a good job. Um, I think actually he even wrote and said, I think he did too good of a job of depicting the despair part more than the hope. So yeah, and I think there's a little bit of that. It's a pretty intense and heavy book. But that is my concern is I want to be authentic and be true to an experience that we have as human beings that other people can relate to. And doing that in a way that doesn't compromise integrity, where I can have artistic license, but at the same time be able to, um, not to, um, I- yeah, I want to be artistic, but not artistic for artistic's sake. I want to be artistic because I was created that way to glorify God and to be able to edify the church, to be able to also medicate the church and help the church in some way and understand that in this story you can get caught up and that hopelessness that you're feeling in right now with your marriage or whether it's at work or with your children or your health, you get caught up in a story and that story can lead, can inspire you. It can, uh, walk you through this labyrinth of suffering and you feel like you're not alone because somebody else is telling this story and what I try to do with my stories is always have them be redemptive because that's just me. I have quite a testimony, and that testimony has led me through very dark places and times in my life, but come out the other side um, having this joy, right? This peace that passes understanding. Um, I love that Bible verse, the joy of the Lord will be my strength, and so that's what I want people to, at the end, they will feel that and be like, wow, I didn't realize that words can inspire me like that. I didn't realize people can use words in that way. That was so cool. That was so interesting. That was so powerful.
And so, with that, how can the church support artistic expression of love for God and healing and all of these things that you mentioned? How can the church be that place or that being, that instrument that helps feed the artistic nature?
Yeah. Yeah. That's something I've been wondering myself. Um, because um, we tend to do what works. We tend to do what we're used to doing, right? We don't like to change, and I understand the world we're living in is changing so rapidly. We just want to feel comfortable and have, our boundaries, have our bumpers, so that we won't go too far over here. And I appreciate that with Christians who want to be careful. Um, because yeah, there is this, you're right, there is, I think, an assumption, which is a false assumption, that, oh, we're going to allow this secular stuff into our church, right?
Mhm.
We're going to allow this guy, what this rapper, Christian novelist, whatever he does. And so, yes, I think there should be concern and be like, okay, well, let's understand what this person is bringing and what they're offering. So a person should be educated, not to just allow anyone up in their church and to get up on the, on the, um, on the platform and start just saying whatever. But it's interesting that people don't have too much of a problem with someone like C.S. Lewis,
Mhm.
right? Who was extremely, extremely creative. From writing children's books to writing more adult themed books, the space trilogy, and writing, of course, these very dense, beautiful prose, in his apologetic books. But I think that's because given enough time, people have had an opportunity to read his stuff and be able to say, okay, we know pretty much what he stands for. People can argue a few things here and there, but for the most part, we know that C.S. Lewis is a good guy. He's on our team, kind of a thing. So it's a little harder, I think, with Christian, more contemporary Christians that are who are artists, creatives, because maybe they don't know the motive or where they're coming from or what they also house. And so that's one thing what I that I try to do is I try to not just be a poet. I have, this book on prose, and so I write articles, write very, very dense, uh, um, some are, not all, but some things that are logically dense and philosophically dense, ethically, that I'm very that they can see, oh, this person has the pedigree, this person has the that rational mental bandwidth to be able to argue the Bible or argue, God's existence or God's goodness. So what I think that the church can do to support Christian artists like me is to first be able to look. If you're not looking for something, you're not going to see it. If you know, and how I look at it is, if a person has this gift, and this gift is something that let's say the world, um, let's say the world admires film, right? Because I think most people, when you ask them what they did over the weekend, they're going to talk about a movie they saw or something like that, whether it's at the movie theater or on Netflix or whatever. So taking something like film and story and being able to bring that, let's say, be a Christian film creator, a director, whatever, I think it is something that the church needs to be on the lookout and see, okay, how can we use these things that Christians are doing to help, first of all, help inspire our own, right, our congregants, but also to have those congregants invite their friends to see what we're doing here is relevant to their lives. Um, and to be able to bring them, let's say someone like myself, one thing that I've been asking myself is how can I bring this gift of spoken word to the church when the church isn't aware that so I'm doing podcasts like these. I went to Florida some months back to do a spoken word at this conference. So I've been able to get a little bit more out there, but the message is to the church leaders to say, hey, your congregants will not want to leave your church if they feel fulfilled. If they feel that what you're doing is preaching the word of God, right? You're preaching from the word of God, you're preaching God's truth, and people, can trust you as a preacher, but they can also see that you care about them because you are wanting to, let's say, you want them to be involved in small group. You want them to be heard. You want to use their gifts and talents and abilities. And when the church feels like, hey, I'm being useful, that's just how God created us, to feel that fulfillment. And so what happens with people who, I think, Christian creatives, I think they're the ones that will tend to leave the churches because they don't feel heard or seen or understood, because they're just this creative type. Now, I think what happens is sometimes the Christian creatives can get, because they might, I don't want to say generalize, but maybe they act on emotion more than, or let's just put it this way, maybe they don't really think through some of their doctrine, or things that they say, or how they represent their art. And so maybe they have drawn suspicion and it's justified, but that's not necessarily the case. So some artists can be very thoughtful with their theology and consistent and be, orthodox. I mean orthodoxy,
Right,
not
right.
yeah, um, not heretical. So one way that I think, simply put, the church can support is to to see it as an investment in their own.
No, that makes sense because I knew a young lady who was big in liturgical dance, but she kind of had more of a hip hop spin to it because that's what she went to school for dance, and that kind of spoke to her. And to some degree, a lot of people accepted it and they thought it was good. You know, she would have the children dancing in church and kind of getting them to understand it. But then there were a lot of people who didn't understand it, and she ultimately left and went to another place because of that feeling of, well, the church wasn't supportive of me, that they basically labeled me as bringing in secular things into the church and it not having a spiritual meaning to it. So I can see where somebody who is creative, even though they have the drive and the passion and they want to, they feel that being ostracized by the church when their ministry is just can be just as powerful as a food pantry ministry or a Sunday school ministry. Is just a little bit different in the way it looks and the way it's presented. So I can definitely see where that creates a dilemma almost, or a weird space for somebody who is a Christian creative to be able to survive and thrive within the four walls.
Yeah, that is something that's heartbreaking to me. It really does. When I hear a testimony, a story where a person like your friend, sorry, you knew this person,
Yeah, yeah.
that God has clearly given them this desire, and then this person went to school for something, has invested their time and themselves, and puts it all together for God's glory, and then other people see it, right, as, oh, you are actually doing something against what we believe is scriptural. I tell you, that can really, depending on the person, it can be a blow. It can be a big blow because people expect, the world to turn against you. People are already, yeah, I know the world, if I'm following, the teachings of Jesus. Jesus said, hey, the world is going to hate you because it hated me. So,
Right.
okay, all right, I'll prepare for that. But what is hard to navigate through is when the guns are turned against you from within, from the church itself, and then you feel like, wait a second, this is not right, this isn't. And so, and I know as artists we can be quite sentimental and um yeah, I guess I'll just use that word, sentimental, and things like that can really affect us and discourage us from using those gifts, which is ironic because God has given us those gifts, and yet the church just feels like, again, it's this assumption that truth has to be, can only is it's only what's in Scripture when we see beauty in so many things in creation, right? So the water, I'm sorry, the Bible that I know of doesn't talk about, I'm trying to think, does it say anywhere, speak anywhere about um, waterfalls? I don't think it does. Maybe
Mm,
in one of the prophetic books, it might use that kind of language, but
yeah.
obviously there is nothing wrong with, going to this exotic island and just enjoying your time with your spouse, or, or just whatever you're, enjoying God's creation, seeing this beautiful waterfall, or maybe you're watching a beautiful, majestic, sublime sunset, you know, okay, well, that is something that is you can give, worship God. And I would say when you're in that environment, it is inspiring, it's invigorating, it is uplifting. And again, it's God's creation. And so that needs to be understood as, hey, there's truth in that. There's truth in that, just like there's truth in God's word and what he says. We can go and, we're talking about natural theology here is what we're talking
Right.
about, right? Go outside and, we see God, and, it talks about that in Romans 1, right? God's handiwork. We can see it in creation. And so we're giving God the glory by, acknowledging that there's truth that is in Scripture, but it's also in nature, so that we can give God glory. But then there's also this truth that he gives to us individually, or not. Truth is maybe not the right word, but a gift that he gives us to worship him with the talents and gifts that he's given us, which is like whether it's like Eric Little to run fast, or a gymnast to do a great, or whatever sport you want. um, there are more ways to worship God than just, let's say, uh, by singing to a microphone. Um, and when we can appreciate those gifts in others, I think that's where your friend would feel fulfilled and would not have left the church. Um, yeah.
And so as we move, obviously, I think to me, the pandemic kind of really gave us pause in seeing that obviously the physical building, the physical structure of church is important, but you can have church, you can have these these ways of
Mhm.
ministry outside of the church. And
Yeah.
we're moving back into the church. We still have hybrid church services, but we have all these other things that we can take advantage of. Moving forward, 10, 15 years from now, where do you see the the lifeblood of ministry coming from? Is it from these outreach ministries of different types, like you said, whether it's a gymnast performing, a singer singing, a spoken word artist doing their thing, or is it still going to be in the traditional confines of the church being the main go-to, and then everything else being an offshoot of that? What do you think?
I'd have to think about that for a moment. In about 10 years, where do I see the church moving in? Are they going to stay, if I hear you correctly, are they going to stay kind of in where we are now? Uh, or are they going to change and appreciate and grow by seeing that there's other ways to do ministry than, let's say, just to be a missionary,
Right.
if you will.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah. Um, I would say that given the way, and whether it's for good or for bad, we see this generation, Gen Z, and we know that they're craving community. That's one thing that I see is they are craving community. They're people who want other people. They want to feel heard and seen and represented. And I'm seeing some of the things that I'm sure you're seeing, that I'm seeing, where it's like, oh, that goes against God's design, or that is just um um I don't know, what's that is profane, or that is just
Right.
wrong or evil, or whatever you want to say. It's like there's definitely that stuff going on, but I think behind it, what people are craving is that kind of connection and community. So with that, and I think the generation, let's say Gen Zers, also are very technology, based, incorporating, if you're going to move forward and seeing, okay, what are things that are neutral, that are not necessarily good or evil, but neutral? Like technology is neutral. For example, what we're doing right now, we're using, this platform to be able to communicate, right?
Hmm.
And um, and so, but somebody could say, hey, that's the work of the devil. Television is the work of the devil. This camera is where
Yeah.
people can do a lot of evil. Well, yeah, but they can do a lot of good too. So I see it as a neutral. So there's this neutral thing that can be used for, so community, this neutrality, that people are like, okay, I want to be represented in a group. Technology, they are seeing the importance of technology. And then also, I think activism is something that this generation is That's kind of their proclivity. Again, it's I think uh, that when um, people are protesting in a violent way is obviously not what is sustainable, not even to themselves. It's very self-contradictory. But this activism is something that's important to this generation. So moving forward, I would say that showing the generation that, hey, we see you, we understand you, and we want to help, you know, um, we stand with you, and we care about you. I think it has to involve an element of maybe of each of those, or maybe one or two of those things to move forward. And so in 10 years from now, I would hope that Christians would be more vocal, more present, more active or activist like in their love for Jesus, in their desire to want to spread the gospel, and have other people learn about, who Jesus is and be freed from their addictions and their hangups and their, all those things that are keeping them from living the abundant life Jesus talked about. So I would say 10 years from now, I hope that that ministries become quite diverse and they are not pigeonholed to, oh, we are the only way to worship God and to truly be holy is to become, I have to become this, that, I have to just sell everything and then I have to go and become a missionary in this third world country and things like that. Yes, those things are wonderful. If you feel called to do that, please be obedient to the Spirit, but also let's be obedient to see, what can we do to reach a generation that clearly is seeking that connection and is wanting to be heard because of their activism. And I see all of those things in being fulfilled in the creative realm, in using the imagination.
Like that. So now I don't want to put you on the spot, but
Please go for it. I like it.
all right, well, can you give us a little bit of spoken word so we can hear a little bit about what you do?
I love it. I love it. Okay. All right. Well, what do you, I'll ask you,
Okay.
okay, I have one that I perform. It's called Mystery of Tears. It's a classic. It's in the From the Ashes We Rise book. But then I have a newer one, which is on about Charlie Kirk, and that's going to be in the upcoming book, Imaginative Apologetics. So I'll give you an option. What would you like to hear?
Let's go with the classic.
Okay, all right. So this one's called Mystery of Tears. Now I'm gonna need to perform it a little bit. So
Okay, go for it.
all right, here we go. It starts off. It's not a real rappy song. It is more contemplative. So it starts off a little bit more. You're gonna feel it a little bit more kind of solemn a little bit, but it will pick up. So here goes. Mystery of Tears. Spasms speak louder than words. Gushing freedom carves canals down mountains of flesh. The fulfillment of time flaps its wings out of the fray as metronome drops of love's deep fill our hearts whole, like Samaritan woman's bucket that overflowed. What can medicate a broken heart better than you? Can love ever be so true as to live without you? One man wept more than all the salty seas of Arabian Egypt combined. He left his signature not on palm branches, shrouds, or sepulchres with redemptive properties of bleach and blood. He stained the earth and broke the curse with his captivity. Ah, we cry distress, blood in his eyes. spear in his side, thorns on his brow. His father left him for now. Pierced metacarpals and punctured pink feet. His mockers debased him to a piece of raw meat, custom pressed onto cumbersome beams. Tetelestai! It is finished, he prophetically screamed. For obedience is a far better spice than our greatest deeds, masked as self-sacrifice. Pain and pleasure he holds in a jar of every memory we hold dear. Truly, substitutionary atonement saves all who sympathize with the mystery of tears.
Very nicely done. I like that. Well done.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you, man.
That was cool. That was cool. So now for our listeners who want to pick up your book, find out more about how they can get connected with you to hear maybe some more spoken word or your blog, how can people reach you?
Well, yeah, so my blog is allthingsflourishing.com, and that's where I post pretty much the whole gamut from poems to short stories to articles. So All Things Flourishing is my blog, and on Amazon, if you just put in my name, Chester Delagneau, I have four books there right now. I have one of I did a I helped my parents write their autobiography of leaving Nicaragua, coming to America, starting over. That one's called Flight to Freedom. Then I have a children's book, Imagining Jesus, we talked about. And then From the Ashes We Rise. But I also have a book in there we didn't talk about. We didn't really cover my academic side. And so I have a book there on biblical ethics that I think is important for the church to ask questions about, hey, what is our ethic, our def I know Jesus told us, to love God, love others, but is that it? I mean, how do we make sense of things like deontological ethics, that we see in the Ten Commandments, and then also this desire that God has given us, is duty and desire, do those go together? Holiness and happiness, is happiness even a biblical term? So this book, Biblical Ethics, is also on Amazon, and I have the hat. I have hats and stickers, and this shirt, Salvador, is on gangsterdrip.etsy.com,
I
which
like
is
that.
funny because my wife always makes fun of me. She's like, gangster drip on Etsy. But I'm like,
Those two
hey,
don't
that's
necessarily work.
yeah. I'm like, hey, I gotta start somewhere. So, but gangsterdrip.etsy.com is where if wanted to buy a Salvador hat and a shirt or stickers. I think I have a sweatshirt on there right now. That's pretty cool. Um, yeah, I have the shirt, this one logo, this one design. It has the Holy Spirit in this tribal dove that's on the chest, and on the back you have this a cross, and then the name Salvador, that's written across the horizontal beam. But on the horizontal beams hang two scales, and they're perfectly measured. They're perfectly um, balanced because one of them stands for justice and the other is mercy. And then we know that the only place in the world where justice and mercy are completely balanced is on the cross. When Jesus, he paid for our sins. So his mercy is that him substituting, right, himself instead of us, but he had to pay for that sin. And so that justice and mercy is just this beautiful depiction on the cross. But I happen to, hey, why not actually show that with, scales? So they're, hanging from the horizontal beam on the back of the shirt. So, gangsterdrip.etsy.com.
Nice. Next, and long as it's not gangsterdrip.pinterest.com.
Yeah.
I think you're good. I think Etsy has a little more street cred than Pinterest right now. So I think you're
Right.
good.
Yeah. Right. Right. And then hopefully that who knows, if this builds a little more traction, I'll do what most people, I don't know, but I think that's the way people are trying going is they're having somebody else create the shirts, but I might go in the direction of buying my own machinery and the material and just building it here, my house, sending it out. But I wanted to see if I could get a little traction going first, if there's some interest, and once there's interest, then I will invest because I believe it's a pretty costly investment to start off with. So we'll see.
That's awesome. Well, Chester, you are a man of many talents. It has been outstanding talking to you and learning your perspective and learning about all the projects you're doing. So, listeners, make sure you go check him out, allthingsflourishing.com. Get his clothes over at gangsterdrip.etsy.com. Make sure you flood him full of stuff because he is, you heard it, he is the real deal. So, Chester, thank you for joining us on the Church with No Walls podcast. Much success to you, many blessings to you moving ahead, and I'm sure we will catch back up with you down the road.
I would love that. I would love that. Thank you, Ryan, for taking the time, having me on your podcast. This has been a delight. I just really appreciated the questions. Really, you hit me with some good questions that have inspired me to probably do some more writing. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And so you've been listening to the Church with No Walls podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dearbone. As always, take care and be blessed.
I was glad when they said, come let us go to the house of the Lord. I was glad when they said, come let us go to the church with no walls. You are my brother, you are my sister. From all over the world we are united in the house of God, in the church with no walls.